Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today, we're asking if Lionel Johnson truly could have conquered Macragge during the Heresy. A general spoiler warning to begin here, as today I will be referencing events from across the Horus Heresy series. But with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, so at the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, the Dark Angels were engaged in the Framus Crusade against Conrad Kurz and the Night Lord's Legion, who kept the Dark Angels tied up upon the eastern fringe for quite some time. However, once finally breaking the back of the Midnight Clad, L. Johnson spied the light of Guilliman's Pharos beacon and decided to head to Ultramar. And this was entirely with the intention of judging Guilliman, to see if he was loyal or yet another betrayer, with L. Johnson fully prepared to invade Macragge and take Guilliman out if he had to. And well, the question for today is, could he? Could L. Johnson have achieved this objective had it come to it? Because as we know, it came perilously close to transpiring. So what are the facts? Well, we know the Ultramarines were rightly feared as the largest legion, by quite a way. And we know that Lionel Johnson had already split his legion into two. And in fact, thanks to the novel Vengeful Spirit, we know the exact number of Dark Angels that the Lion took to Ultramar. Leman Russ is on terror, said Malcador. I know. Even here I can feel the Wolf King's presence. He brings word of the Lion. 20,000 Dark Angels are reportedly bound for Ultramar. Why does he not make haste for terror? Sweat ran down Malcador's back at the strain of maintaining this connection. There are unsettling rumours of what is happening in Guilliman's domain. I cannot see the 500 worlds. Why is that? We call it the Ruin Storm. Nemo and I believe the slaughter on Calf to have been part of an orchestrated chain of events that precipitated the birth of a catastrophic and impenetrable wolfstorm. And what do you believe Roboute is doing? It's Guilliman. What do I think he's doing? He's building an empire. And the Lion goes to stop him. So the Wolf King says, my lord. So, L. Johnson had 20,000 legionaries still under his current control on his arrival into Ultramar. While an undoubtedly formidable force, that is an absolutely huge gap in numbers in comparison to Guilliman's legion, estimated to be over 200,000. However, we do have to note the legion numbers within the Horus Heresy series were a little all over the place at times, so we shouldn't rely on this too much. However, I do think it's safe to say L. Johnson had a big disadvantage in numbers. But that said, there's a couple of factors that I think are important here. The first is Guilliman's entire legion would not be at Macragge. They were still fighting and battling all over Ultramar. Yes, Guilliman weathered the betrayal at Calf pretty well, but that doesn't mean the fight is over. Because it isn't. The galaxy was aflame and Ultramar's worlds needed defending. And Ultramar was vastly bigger back then as well. Gargantuan in size, in fact. So, 20,000 Dark Angels with a fleet to match in orbit directly over Macragge is a very legitimate threat. And secondly, L. Johnson was doing his judging of Guilliman in person, welcomed to Macragge with all the honour and pageantry a fellow loyal Primarch deserved. So if he decided Guilliman indeed needed sanctionings, shall we say, well then it is most likely something that the Lion would have launched immediately and by surprise. And he might well have had to, because the Fortress of Hera was one of the most formidable bastions in the galaxy. A fact reinforced during the Lion's visit, as when he was meeting with Guilliman, he secretly had his legionaries loaded aboard drop pods across the fleet. However, Conrad Kurz launched the drop pods from the flagship the Invincible Reason unexpectedly, and in response the Ultramarines had the fortress's void shields up and orbital cannons ready within a matter of seconds. So L. Johnson would have definitely had to have had something in mind to deal with that measure. Perhaps some way of lowering the shields from the surface, or maybe by sheer overwhelming bombardment. It was only the Invincible Reason's drop pods that were launched after all, 5 companies worth of legionaries, and L. Johnson did have an entire fleet's worth of 20,000 at his disposal. Maybe his intention was simply to go full force if he had to. I think we could be here all day pondering the how the Lion was going to go about it, but put simply, could he have done it? Well, I think he could have taken out Guilliman if he wanted to, with the two of them being in person, be it capturing Guilliman or slaying him outright. However, the grander problem of Macragge is harder to see. There's a quote in Unremembered Empire which shows the Dark Angels may well have been able to achieve it if they tried. Is it really the Lion, he asked. In such strength, she replied, that he could have been a serious threat if he did not come peacefully. However, still, it's hard to envisage. While Guilliman's legion may have been spread out across Ultramar, I'd still imagine Macragge would have had a sizable force present, especially so considering Guilliman was there. And that's not even including all of the other forces that Macragge had as well, such as the Defence Force and Imperial Army. We know Ultramar of all the worlds of the Imperium had those already in place and well drilled. And then there's the fact of the Fortress of Hera itself. The shields and the gunpowder. L. Johnson had formidable might to bring to bear, but it would have surely taken time to wear down the shields of the fortress. And the moment the Dark Angel's fleet opened fire, you would have expected Macragge's own fleet to immediately respond. This wasn't Calf. The Ultramarines completely unprepared to be betrayed. They were very sceptical this time around with the heresy in full swing, the Dark Angels emerging from the void. They were monitoring them very closely. So L. Johnson's only hope, in my opinion, would have been to land his men outside the boundaries of the shield and fight their way through the capital, whilst he dealt with Guilliman in person. Now, that feat is definitely achievable for 20,000 Dark Angels, there's no doubt about that, but it would have undoubtedly still taken time, and I think that is undoubtedly more the ally of the Ultramarines than it is the First Legion. I mean, this is the capital of an entire empire we're talking about here. Every second the Dark Angels were delayed would be one more second the Ultramarines bring more power to bear. And of course, that is the Ultramarine forte, their skill, responding and adapting. There's no legion better in that kind of scenario. So even in, say, the loss of Guilliman, the Dark Angels would have had a fierce fight on their hands with the rest of Macragge. And it feels crazy to say a force of 20,000 legionaries couldn't conquer a single world. But the fact is, this was a world defended by fellow legionaries, manning one of the most formidable fortresses in the entire Imperium, possessing a force of legionaries arguably at least the same size as the Dark Angels present, and with an almost unlimited number of extra forces to bring to bear as reinforcements. And so, when you consider all of that, I'm not sure this would be a war the Lion could win. Unless of course you count taking out Guilliman alone as the victory the Lion needed. However, for me, I think he would have undoubtedly have to have conquered Macragge. Again, I think L. Johnson would have definitely been able to defeat Guilliman in personal combat, but I don't think the Dark Angels would have been able to claim Macragge. It would have been a tough, brutal war within its streets and fortress, but I just think with every single moment that passed, the Ultramarines would have only got stronger, while the Dark Angels would have weakened. So, could the Lion have taken out Guilliman? Yes. Could the Lion have conquered Macragge? No. Without his full legion, I think a war for Macragge was just a little too much to ask. And that's not even considering the fact he would have still had to have escaped Ultramar alive. And so as always everyone, what do you think? Do you think the Lion and his 20,000 Dark Angels could have conquered Macragge? Do you think he could have taken out Guilliman? And would Guilliman alone have been enough? What particular tactic do you think the Lion would have employed to try and conquer the Fortress of Hera? Would he have acted from inside, or would he have been entirely dependent on his fleet above? And even if Guilliman was taken out or taken prisoner by L. Johnson, do you think the Ultramarines Legion would have continued to fight? Or maybe would they have surrendered? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.